Good morning, everybody. It seems that spring is here, in a hurry to be summer. I hope everyone's well. I hope those of you that want to have been able to get vaccinated. I hope that you that don't want to get vaccinated, as opposed to becoming incubators for variants. But I feel a definite lightening in the weather and in the level of anxiety amongst people I run into. People are celebrating their vaccinations. I went to a Passover Seder with my daughter and husband and granddaughter and another couple, and all fully vaccinated, and it was a delight to sit around a table without masks and talk and chat and hug each other. So if we can have a little discipline as Americans, we may whip this thing. So today, I'm actually using, instead of my own notes, I'm using a transcript from a speech that Suzuki Roshi gave in 1971. And it's a speech I like very much. It's important, and it doesn't matter if you're a layman or a Buddhist or whatever you are. This really discusses the actual koan that we all face in our lives every day. This is the koan of being human. It goes like this. So there was a monk, a famous monk named Fuketsu, who was a fourth disciple of Rinzai. Rinzai and Dogen represent the major Japanese teachers of the two big schools of Zen practice, Soto and Rinzai. So Fuketsu said to his assembled monks, if one particle of dust is raised, meaning if you lift up one particle of dust, the state will come into being. If no particle of dust is raised, the state will perish. Then when he died, his disciple, Secho, gave an appreciatory verse, and he said this: let the elders knit their brows as they will. Puzzle, be irritated, be cross. For the moment, let the state be established. Where are the wise statesmen, the veteran generals? The cool breeze blows, I nod to myself. So this is a critical point. Whether we're laymen, whether we're Buddhists, whether we're spiritual, whether we're not, the task we're faced with is to allow ourselves to be instructed by big mind, not the coming and going of our personality and our whims and will. We're all deluded, Buddhists as well as everyone else. But the practice of meditation, finding that space between your thoughts and sinking into it more and more deeply through time, allows you to slip from the small mind, the mind of your ego, the mind of your personality, into big mind, which is the way things actually are, which is who we want as a teacher, what we want as a teacher. When you begin to practice this way, it's a very uplifting experience at first. You feel like you're including everything: your parents, your teachers, the altar, the incense, the birds, the trees. It's very heady. It's a high. But actually, if you continue this practice, it becomes normal. And then you don't have to think of big mind at all. It's just normal. Big mind, in contrast to small mind, if you're picking and choosing, is not really big mind. Big mind is normal. Big mind is the way things are. And that's what we're trying to be receptive to. That's what we're trying to read instruction from. So the reason that we have these sittings, the reason that we have a Zen center, the reason that we have Buddhists and everything, our practice, is so we can find this big mind and so that we can be ourselves. Basically, all the organizations or the state or the creations that we make them tentatively, or we should make them tentatively. Because it's important to know that when you pick up a speck of dust, you're picking up everything. You're picking up life and death, birth and death. You're picking up enlightenment and delusion. You're picking up Buddhas and devils. You're picking up greed, hate, and delusion. And for every good thing that we may think we are doing, we're also doing lots of bad things. There's no way around it. That in itself is the Genjo Koan. It's inseparable. When we begin acting, when we begin generating karma, we will not just be generating good karma. So everything that we do will have a shadow. So we have to do everything we do, not with the basis of permanence in mind. We're not building a Zen center for the centuries, because we don't know what will be needed in the centuries. If everybody was in big mind, we wouldn't need a Zen center. If everyone was wearing priest's robes, we wouldn't need to wear priest's robes. So we're responding to this particular situation as best we can, in the center of delusion, with deluded responses, but trying our best because we want to do something. A speck of dust is just a little thing. When Fuketsu said it, he meant something like building a monastery or building a practice center. Still, just a little thing. In the world of big mind, in the entire universe, it's just a grain of rice. So not to attach overmuch importance to it, but to be wide awake and to understand when you pick it up, when you begin to do anything to save the world, to build a Zen center, you are beginning the entire world of contradictions, of duality, of acting within delusion. And there's no way around it. That's the great koan. Now, if you don't pick up the dust, nothing will happen. So that's the rub. You can pick up the dust, you can start Zen practice, you can start to save the last whale, you can start to do anything, and you will inevitably generate negative karma and negative consequences as well as what you're doing. But if you don't pick up the dust, nothing at all happens. So there are many people that don't pick up the dust. They say, that's not my problem. I don't care if other people suffer, if I'm happy. It's okay. It's not my business. I'm not going to do it. That's one option. But then nothing changes. They don't change. Their problems don't change. The world in which they live doesn't change. Now, but for those of us who do pick up the dust, we have to realize that the purpose of creating this Buddhist practice is not to create Buddhism. That's not the point. The point of this practice is to become ourselves And becoming ourselves means surrendering to big mind, to letting ourselves be instructed by big mind. If big mind tells us to do something, we do it. If it doesn't, we don't do anything. Buddhist practice is not altars and robes, priests and laymen, big stately Japanese temples. So when Dogen realized this, that if you picked up one grain of dust, I may have his quote here. Dogen Zenji said, if you pick up one thing, there's birth and death, enlightenment and delusion, Buddha and sentient beings, something good and something bad. So we call it Genjo Koan. This is our koan to solve, the actual koan of our lives. This was why I didn't stay in Rinzai. I wasn't so interested in koans that had been written down and answered. I was interested in problems like this. How do we live? How do we minimize harm? How do we maximize, how do we support life and positivity? How do we minimize negativity? You know that old Johnny Mercer song? You have to accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, don't mess with Mr. In Between. So the goal of Buddhism is where we don't need Buddhism. We don't need a teacher. If we don't have a teacher, we can follow our own way, which is the best way. Now, you may need a teacher to reach that point, but it's important not to be confused. You don't become a teacher to become a teacher. You become a teacher to help people become themselves. When they become themselves, they don't need you, and that's the best. And if everyone were to become themselves, which is to say, an adjunct of big mind, we wouldn't need all these practices and religions and spiritual practices. The most important point is to always try to do something from a big mind perspective and to do it as well as you can. You don't become a teacher for high status. You don't become a teacher or a leader or anything to aggrandize your ego and your ideas of glory and glamour. I mean, lots of people do. And that's why the newspapers are full of overdoses and divorces and scandal and crazy stuff. But we take this practice on because we have an intuition that there's something beside our small mind, something that will put us more in concert and concord with the universe. And that's why we meditate. We meditate to find those spaces between our thoughts, to slow down our body, to allow our mind to slow down. That's what we're up to. So when Secho said, old men will be unable to relax their eyebrows as they would otherwise, they'll say, oh, you silly boys starting a Zen center. Oh, you guys, what are you undertaking? Well, he says this because the old men understand that for every good deed, you'll unleash 5 or 10 or 20 bad deeds. But you know, we don't have a choice. We either don't pick up the dust, we leave everything exactly the way it is, but something moves us to pick up the dust. But we pick it up awake. We pick it up trying to locate ourselves in big mind, to immerse ourselves like walking in fog until we're soaked with it, and listen to it as opposed to our own little directives. So what Suzuki Roshi reminds us is that it's good to fulfill our responsibility, for me to be a teacher, or you to be a priest, or you to be a lay student, or whatever it is, to do your job, to do your work, Do whatever. But if there's the slightest idea of self, of gain in it, Dogen says you're as far off the mark as the distance between heaven and earth. Because the world of self is, although it's included in big mind, it's exclusive of big mind. It's like looking at a huge carpet and fastening on one little star in the pattern. Yeah, you can watch the star all you want, but it's part of the whole carpet. And what you want to do is be synchronous, be consonant with the whole carpet. So even when we have a good practice, that's an enemy of Buddhism. That means we're already got some idea of good and bad, and we're judging ourselves as if from the outside, as if we were facts. That's not why we're studying Buddhism. To study the self is to forget the self. We have to study the self to find out how it enchants us, how it tricks us, how it fascinates us. We have to study it to recognize it in all its guises and all its beguilements and forms, its self-importance. And then we forget it. And we try to shift our attention to big mind. Suzuki Roshi says, we should not be proud of our faculties or our personality or our bright, smart minds. When you have a good practice, that's also the enemy of Buddhism. You should not pursue the Buddha way for the sake of change or for your own personal interest. You shouldn't seek advantage in your everyday life. Whether people like what you do or not, if it's necessary, you should do it. And it's necessary if you feel that your instructions come from big mind. So if you pick up a speck of dust, people may not like it. But you should understand that it's just a tentative beginning. We do what we have to do because otherwise we do nothing. We allow the suffering. We don't try to help other people. We don't practice compassion. We don't practice mindfulness. We don't revere the animals that are being caught in snares and traps and killed for ivory. We don't respect the clean air and the water and the... So, it's enormous. Breaks your heart, the degree and amount of suffering in the world. We have to do something. So we pick up the dust. But we pick it up knowing that it's diluted and knowing that we're going to create negative consequences. And so we pick it up tentatively. Well, let's just start here. Let's build this temple. Let's build this little sangha of people that meet and talk. We don't know how long it'll last. We don't know how long it'll be necessary. If we're really good, people will come into their own nature. You don't need to listen to me. Your own nature will tell you. I've been doing this a long time, but I would much rather listen to Suzuki Roshi. It's much less confusing. Am I being smart? Am I being good? Am I being helping? Am I being boring? I'd much rather listen to Suzuki Roshi. He's like the pure spinal telephone, pure communication. And so what he says is, we say we establish Buddha's way with defilement. The defilement comes with our decision to establish Buddha's way. And knowing this, whatever we do is delusion, and knowing it's delusion, to do something is the Bodhisattva's way. Because the Bodhisattva, who hears the suffering of the world, will not just sit by and do nothing. So we are trying to perfect ourselves as bodhisattvas. We're trying to bring Buddha to life by acting as Buddhas in this existence. He left us an instruction manual. the precepts, the Eightfold Path. And then we have never been separate from Big Mind. We have never been separate from the entire universe. So it is supporting us. And if we just get over the idea of some personal separate self that's just a little bit more important than everybody else, we're open to the instructions of Big Mind. We'll be happiest when people no longer need us. We'll be happiest when people know how to solve their own problems, when people realize that it's on you. When not Fuketsu, when Secho said, who will live and die with you? He lifted up a staff. That's his piece of dust. And he said to the students, who will live and die with you? Now, he wasn't trying to enlist an army. He was trying to make the point that you are an unrepeatable expression of the universe. You will know what to do. You have this short expanse of time, this sack of flesh wrapped around awareness. And if you hear the cries of the world and are moved and have to do something, then you do it. But you know that you're creating a mess. So you do it delicately, carefully. You don't take overmuch pride in the magnificence of the edifice, the greatness of your practice, how good you are at all of this, because for everything you do, you're just creating destruction as well. You build a hospital, you've wiped out the arena where 100,000 creatures lived. Suzuki Roshi has a beautiful little statement. Oh yeah, here it is. Even in Tassajara, we're eating eggs, you know? They're living beings. Eggs are not dead. Each grain is a living being. You're killing them. But you have to eat them knowing they're not dead. You don't have a choice. You cannot help but destroy life. Life eats itself. That's the way things are. We can do it because we chose big mind instead of small mind. Small mind will say, oh no, the Buddhist precepts say I can't take life. Oh no. Well, when I come back, I'll bury you. Big mind says, this is the way it is. Be grateful, be tender, be tentative. Have rituals of apology, have rituals of sensitivity, acknowledge the lives of the things you eat. I think I told you once that when I studied with Robert Aitken, who was a Rinzai teacher, he used to interpret the precept of a disciple of the Buddha does not kill as a prohibition against abortion, and would refuse to give permission to any of his female students to have an abortion. But he was so moved by their suffering and by the stories and the incidences of how they became pregnant and what a pregnancy would do to their lives, that he decided that he had to remove himself from that decision, that the decision was the woman's decision. And certainly, it's even logical to say that as long as a fetus is not viable outside of the mother's body, it's the mother's decision. I think it's always the mother's decision. But what he did and what he asked was that the mothers name the baby and that they would then hold a funeral for it. Because he did not want to not acknowledge that a life was being cessated. And I think it's a problem that many liberal people have who are pro-choice. You'll hear them say, oh, it's just a fetus. Oh, it's just a salamander. Oh, it's just a few cells. But there's credence to the argument of the pro-life people that say it's a life. But they don't understand the Genjo Koan. The Genjo Koan is, yes, it's a life. And there are many circumstances in which we eat life, in which we have to foster some other goal. We can't make a hard and fast rule. So let's move with tenderness. Let's move with respect. Let's move with tentativeness. We don't know what'll happen in the future, so we're concerned about this moment. How fully can we be in this moment? How carefully can we be in this moment? How aware can we be in this moment? Whether you're happy or not is important, but you'll be happy if you're following a good path. And if you're not happy, you'll care a lot less because you're following a good path, a path with a heart that will continue to feed you. So when we're supported by big mind, when we don't lose ourselves in small mind, that's Dogen Zenji's Genjo Koan. It's a big scale where everybody has great, great freedom from their usual small activities. You can think of it like a great stage play where Buddha's act is playing 24 hours a day, 24/7. And it was Dogen's genius to see that this was the big koan of every existence. And he set up this stage, and whatever we can do on the stage is actually Buddha's activity, which will continue forever. It's why we say no birth and death, and also no extinction of it. So let me just recap. This is Suzuki Roshi. The goal of practice is not to have any teaching or teacher or sentient beings, where there's no Buddhism and no Buddha. But here's the caveat. If you think that you can do this without any training, that you can have that kind of life without any training, that's a big mistake. You don't know what you're doing. When you say you don't need Buddhism, you're either a great fool or a very selfish person. He said, I'd rather that you be a great fool than a selfish person. Even though Buddha spoke about freedom, Buddha's idea of freedom, big mind, is not like your idea of freedom of doing whatever you want whenever you want it. So we need this training. We need this training to understand what nature actually is. Not our little nature, not the biases of our personality. So when we realize our nature, it can be a big problem. You're going to disappoint people. You're going to make people unhappy. But for someone to say that all you have to do is follow your own nature, those people don't understand nature. So we're never ignored by the universe. We're never separate from the universe. It's our only reliable guide. We are made by that which made hummingbirds and ocelots and leopards and mountain rangers, water, rain, fog, poisonous snakes, Donald Trump. Unless we're supported by some truth and follow that truth, we can never be free. That's the rub of being a human. So we've found, tentatively, temporarily, that Buddha's truth seems to do less harm, more good, and we follow it knowing that we're eating living beings, that we're killing other creatures to build our temples and our houses and our cars and our phones, and but we're doing our best, trying to stay awake, not pretending we're good, not pretending we're better, not pretending we're pure or we have some pure place to stand outside the rest of it. We're doing our best. And we sit zazen, and we sit zazen, and we sit zazen whether we're bored, whether we're happy, whether we're unhappy, because in between those breaks in our thinking, the world intrudes. The world enfolds us and instructs us. Thank you very much. You can join me in the metta prayer. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be happy and at peace. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be happy and at peace. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be happy and at peace.